When you do a long fast, it's something similar, that you sleep less. On the 4th and 5th day of a long fast, you sleep a lot less because the body will wake you up to hunt or go down the supermarket.
The indicators are going green and boom, boom, boom.
In summer, yeah, please release me and let me dream of making mad love to my girl on the heat. There are enough tights with my teeth. I can't get no sleep. Glow sticks.
Perfect.
Yes. Strong.
So the topic today is sleep. Something that we do
Obviously.
every day or every night. Sal, are you a fan of sleep?
Oh, I love sleeping. My cat loves sleeping too. She's sleeping right now.
So,
Or not.
what do you know about sleep?
Just got up. What I know about sleep, I know that I'm getting way too little of it.
Really?
That's for sure. Yeah, sometimes, depends.
How many hours on average, Sal, would you say you get?
When I find the time, on average, I'll get 7 hours. But then it depends also what quality of sleep I'm getting, because sometimes I sleep for 8 or 9 hours, but effectively I see on my app, I'm using an app to track that I really slept for 4 hours or something. So I got up quite a lot. So yeah, sleep. One thing I can tell you is sleep. I noticed that I needed much more than I used to when I was 18, 17. I used to pull 48-hour sessions back then with the work, like working 2 hours straight in 2 different companies without sleeping, and I could do it. I couldn't do that today. So sleep definitely is something I like. It's important, and I noticed that if I don't get enough, then the whole day is just, you can throw it away. What about you?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by sleep.
How much sleep do you get, James, would you say?
I try and get 8.
Sleep well?
I try and get 8. I do feel a lot better on 8 than 7. Less than 7, and it really is, like Sal said, you may as well scrunch up the day and throw it in the bin a little bit, because my mood is awful. I can't concentrate on things. So I've sort of found my sweet spot, my sweet spot at about 8. And also recently I've been listening to a few podcasts about sleep and about the science of sleep and how you can make yourself more alert. You can help the process of waking up and also falling asleep. So hopefully we'll go into that a little bit later on. How about you, Dan?
Yeah, man, I try and go for 7-8 hours a night. I'm pretty in bed pretty early, kind of 9, 10 o'clock, and then I get up about 5, 6 o'clock on average. But I think I can do a few nights of 7 hours, and then maybe a few nights of 6. If I did 6, I could do a day of 6, 5.5, and I probably feel it at the end of the day and need to get to bed on time. But I'm not too. It doesn't ruin my day too much. Sometimes, funny enough, I do sometimes feel that when I get, you can't plan this, but it just so happens that when I do get less sleep for some reason, the next day I kind of find myself a little bit more sharp or alert or something like that. It feels like, or maybe I'm less. Maybe I'm not letting. I suppose I don't have the energy to let small things bother me. I kind of have to look at the bigger things maybe because I'm not as aware, and it's almost better for me some days. I honestly believe that. I know I can't back that with any science, but just from experience, time and time again, it.
Even if it's the placebo, so if it works, then it works. But the interesting thing about low sleep, which I've realised recently, is that there's a lot of machismo around sleeping less. Some people are really proud that they can sort of survive on 3 or 4 hours a night, and it's a problem in the culture, I think, because we try and do more things later and later and later, and we've got our phones and our TV and then we've got more to do in the day, and the thing that gets squeezed out and we almost throw it away without valuing it is the sleep in the night. But just one fact, I've got loads, but men who sleep less than 6 hours a night, they have a testosterone age which is 10 years older than their biological age. So it ruins your testosterone, which is important for muscle growth, sexual performance, etc.
Oh, I know you ain't talking about me, boy. I'm joking. Yeah, I'm sure that makes sense.
But this, the thing that really caught my interest in this was a podcast on the Joe Rogan Experience, number 1109, with Matthew Walker, and he calls himself the sleep diplomat. He's a neuroscientist, and he calls himself the sleep diplomat, and he's written a book called Why We Sleep. And his big thing is telling people, trying to spread the news and trying to spread the science of why it's so important that we get better sleep. I think there's an obsession with the quantity, and it should be more about, like you were saying, Sal, the quality. It's not about forcing yourself, because, well, a couple of reasons. Number one, sleep anxiety is a bigger problem than getting an hour less sleep than might be ideal, because then you're not going to sleep if you're feeling anxious anyway. And also, another podcast which I really recommend is Andrew Huberman's, and he talks about ultradian cycles. So throughout the day and night, our life is split up into these 90-minute chunks. And in a 90-minute chunk of sleep, we go through the 4 stages of sleep and REM sleep, which is the dream state, every 90 minutes, right? So he says it's better to wake up at the end of one of these 90-minute chunks, 90-minute cycles, these ultradian cycles, than to wake up in the middle of one of these 90-minute cycles. Does that make sense? So it's better in some ways, according to Huberman, to sleep for 6 hours than 6.5. Because 6 hours, you're actually getting to the end of a 90-minute cycle.
It's very interesting.
Oh, wow.
Because I had a friend who was in the Spanish military, and he told me that back then they learned basically that if you cannot get the optimum amount of sleep, and I don't remember because it was like 20 years ago when he told me that, but it's kind of similar to what you are just saying. If they couldn't get their optimum amount of sleep, which might be 8 or 9 hours, it was actually better that they just get, in extreme fight situations, of course, because it's a military, even sleep like something like, so 90 minutes, let's make a multiplicator of that, 270 minutes, something like that. So even if they just sleep a couple hours, it's still better. But then they have to wake up really at that time and not sleep an hour more or something. So
so in that case, 3 hours would be better. 3 hours would be better than 3.5, say.
Yeah.
Because you're doing 2 90-minute blocks and then you wake up after a 90-minute cycle. But I thought that was fascinating. I'd never heard that.
Yeah, definitely.
And then another thing he said was it's not about the quantity. It's not about the quantity. It's also about the consistency. Because there have been studies, for example, he cited one study from Harvard Medical, and it said that the consistency of sleep is much more important for your brain health, for your concentration, compared to the total amount of sleep that you get in a week. So, for example, if you get 10 hours one night, Monday night, then Tuesday you go 5, and then you go 6, and then 11, and then 4. So you've got this massive variation in quantity. It is better to do 7, 7, 7, 7 and keep it consistent and have a consistent, bedtime and wake up time.
Right.
It's much more beneficial to have consistency rather than adding up the total amount in the week, because it's not like a bank where you can deposit and you can get credits and debits, right? Sleep doesn't work like that. So you can't make up for what you've lost the night before. It just doesn't work because the body clock starts again every 24 hours.
I guess it's also the only...
So when
go ahead then.
Well, when I say about having, if I get 5 or 6 one night, I'm not bothered too much. I wouldn't then think I need 9 tomorrow. I'd just think, make sure I get a proper, don't do 2 nights of 5.5 in a row, because then on the third day I will feel knackered, But I wouldn't try and make up for the loss of sleep. I'd just, if I was up late for whatever reason and got a lack of sleep, I'd just make sure I got, 8 hours. And probably, if I went to bed at like 8 o'clock, I'd almost set the alarm for 4, because I think any more than 8 can be detrimental a lot of the time. You just feel groggy and all that kind of thing.
That's a funny thing, isn't it? Do you feel that then? Do you get too much?
Yeah, it's definitely just as bad.
Yeah, I think that's more to do with it. Your body clock's just completely off, because you've got this 24-hour body clock called the circadian cycle, and Huberman is talking about you actually got this incredible thing, right? You've got this mechanism above the roof of your mouth, right? You can actually imagine it there, and he says this is where the body clock is situated in the brain. And so as soon as you see the first sunlight, this is why it's really important in the morning to see sunlight as soon as you can, because it will set that clock. So it will literally be like a stopwatch going off, and you start. Yeah, I did. And then 14 to 16 hours later, you sort of adenosine. The adenosine is the important chemical, because it builds up the longer we're awake. So as soon as you see the first daylight, that sort of sets your clock, and then you've got 14 to 16 hours, and the adenosine builds up. You get sleepier and sleepier.
He was also saying something about catching that first bit of daylight, wasn't he? And then after, like when the first sun comes up, it's a certain kind of daylight that is better for you than what you'd get if you caught, after 3 hours or something when the sun's risen a certain amount.
Yeah,
remember this part?
You've got to try and see direct sunlight before 9 a.m. because after 9 a.m. it's too late. I mean, I think there's something about the quality of the sunlight changes, and then your body clock will be all out of whack. So even if like we're all, well, a lot of us are working at home at the moment. So even just a little walk around the block and getting a few minutes of sunlight.
And direct, wasn't it, through the window?
Direct, yeah, even through a window. Like, I've got really geeky about this, and I've downloaded this app on my phone that measures the lux, which is the measurement of sunlight. And it's amazing because you can hold your phone up, and it gives you the reading of the strength of the light in the room. So even where I am now, right, with the artificial light, it will be about 15 or 20, even though it seems bright. You go outside on a cloudy day and you think it's dingy outside, it's in 5,000 or 10,000. The sun comes out, I'm here in Rome, the sun comes out, even in the morning it's over 100,000. So because it works, because part of your eye is actually part of your brain. Did you remember this bit? That it sort of it triggers it. I mean, you should go to the podcast for the full information, but
wasn't it Kahneman who did tests with that when he was measuring the reaction of the pupils, in response to different images that they showed to people, and so he basically said that, or his theory was, and you also won a Nobel Prize, I think, for that, or wasn't it for that? Maybe for something else, I don't know. It was part of his research back then that, basically the eye, you can tell the truth through the eye because it's a direct extension to the thoughts in your brain, something like that.
Yeah, it is actually a part of the brain. I think it's the retina. I might be mistaken. I think it's the retina. It's the only part of the brain which is actually, outside of the skull, or has a view to the external world. So, yeah, it's a fascinating subject.
I was listening. Maybe the algorithm gave it to me because we were talking about it in the group chat. But Jeff Bezos clips came up to me, and it was about him getting how much sleep he gets, and he said he gets 8 hours, and everyone was surprised. And he said, "Well, the thing is, when I was running a startup, and I'd get a lot less," he said, and I had to make. He was talking about how he had to make lots of decisions per day. So I guess he was just so busy that he just physically, you'd wake up and there'd be something to do, and you couldn't get back to sleep, because once you've had enough sleep, if there is stuff to do, you could reset after 2 hours, couldn't you? I don't know if you've had busy times in your life and you fall asleep and you wake up kind of 3 hours later, and if there is something you could do, you'd be doing it because you can't get straight back to sleep, But he was saying that now, in the stage he's at, he makes the bigger decisions, and he was kind of saying, I only have to make that. If I make 3 good decisions a year, they'll have a massive impact. So I need enough sleep so I'm making wise decisions. Whereas I've got people under me who make the daily decisions.
Yeah.
And so they can get by without a lack of sleep. So that's really interesting, isn't it? Because you can picture these guys and you kind of think they're just people who sleep 2 hours a night and get by fine because they're so driven. But I thought that was interesting.
I think it's also genetical. I think there are some people who are literally after 3 hours of sleep are as energetic and recharged as people who have had their 8 or 9 hours of sleep. But I'm not sure if they have a very long life expectancy.
But it's interesting you say that, Sal, because on this JRE podcast, Matthew Walker talks about this, and he says some people say to me that there's this gene that you can survive on 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and he says it does exist, but it's like 0.000000001% of the population. He says you're more likely to be hit by lightning. And he says it's funny because he talks to a lot of people, doing his work, and when he says, it's this tiny fraction of 1% of the population that have this gene that allows you to fully function on such little sleep, and so many people put the hand up. I think that's me. But it does exist.
I mean, like those times I'm talking about where I'm busy and I do wake up after 3 hours, I'd feel it later on in the day. It wouldn't not affect me later on, but I'm just saying when you wake up in the moment, you've almost had enough sleep to recharge so your mind can switch onto something. It's a bad thing. Like, it's better if you go back to sleep, but I can see why. If you had a big start, if you were starting Amazon, you probably would be doing that sort of thing, sleeping sporadically.
Another thing that the Huberman recommends, and I've been trying recently, are these things called non-sleep deep rest protocols. So if you wake up really early and you can't get back to sleep, then he says try one of these NSDR, non-sleep deep rest protocols, and it gives you almost the same benefits, the same level of intense rest as sleep does, but you don't necessarily fall asleep. So there's one called Yoga Nidra, 2 words, Yoga Nidra, and they're sort of like scripts. I've been following them in the afternoon for like 10 or 15 minutes recently when I get that dip, because you do get that dip between 3 and 4 p.m. And they both of these scientists say that that's a natural dip. It doesn't make any difference if you eat or not. It's not about the food, the lunch that you have. And so he says also 3 or 4 o'clock, if you can spare 10 minutes, one of these non-sleep deep rest protocols will really give you a boost for the rest of the day. And this Yoga Nidra script is great. You sort of sit there and it makes you do a body scan and focus on your breath. It's kind of a meditation, you can look it up on YouTube, but it works really well. And you like after 10 minutes, it's like a 2-hour nap. It's incredible.
So something I remember from the Huberman podcast was the story about was it Edison in the lab with the ball bearings?
That's right. Yeah.
He had a ball bearing and he had an armchair, a ball bearing, and a saucepan. Have you ever heard this, Sal?
No. What was it?
Yeah. I think you've told us before. Then it's a good one.
Yeah, it was Edison in the lab supposedly, and he was busy all day, every day, trying to solve problems and get new ideas and stay creative. And so when he'd get to a conundrum in the lab, he'd have an armchair, some ball bearings, and a saucepan, and he'd sit in the armchair. And he'd have the ball bearings in his hand and put the saucepan beneath the ball bearings, and he'd nod off, like he'd go to sleep. So just before the ball bearings would fall out of his hand and hit the saucepan and wake him up, and that little split second of sleep would you could see how that would happen, couldn't you? Like if you were stuck in something in your head and then you just had that quick nod off, it would maybe give you a fresh perspective on things. Yeah, I've repeated that many times.
Like floating into the subconscious, into the dream world. Yeah.
But I will say as well, and I'm sure again, this is just I've always kept my ear out when I'm listening to some of these sleep podcasts and what have you. I will say I know times when I've slept little, and so when I row on the machine, it's quite a good. It's very consistent. Like the weather isn't an issue. You've got less variables, Whereas when you're running out on the road, weather might take a toll on your times and all this. And I don't time my runs, but so I notice how I am on a rowing machine, because you're literally looking at a number, and do you know what I mean? There's less variables, and I've noticed times when I've slept less and I've got a bad night's sleep, and maybe I've sort of dragged my heels through the day, and then I've got back and I've got to go on the rowing machine, and I've just pulled something out just unbelievable. And it tends to be when I'm tired, and it's almost like I'm in some sort of survival mode or something like that, because I'm just rowing out of my skin. And it does tend to be when I'm a bit run down and things like that. So I don't know if you've ever heard any sort of science about that up, but definitely I used to get in the swimming pool a little bit as well, and they had a clock on the wall, and I just I'd get a near similar time every time I did it, and then all of a sudden one day I'd just pull something would knock a mad amount of time off, and you'd be almost run down. Have you ever heard anything like that?
Yeah, I don't know what that could be. Like you said, fight or flight.
Yeah.
Because also, when you do a long fast, it's something similar, that you sleep less. On the 4th and 5th day of a long fast, you sleep a lot less because the body will wake you up to hunt or go down the supermarket, and super alert. So you get less sleep, but you're more alert because, maybe, if you think about it in evolution, your body thinks you're in some kind of danger, so it needs to be, more alert, even if you haven't rested fully.
And probably there are some defense mechanisms, like when you walk along the street and you're like kind of dozing away in your mind, and all of a sudden a dog comes around the corner barking at you, and you get literally in the fight or flight. But these are, I guess, temporary short flashes that don't last very long, and they can't be maintained by the body. So it's just a shock to the system to hopefully get you out of there. But then after that, you might return to your previous state, or at least you can maintain it for a very long time.
Oh, Sal, I wanted to ask you as well, because you're a musician. Among your many skills,
I wouldn't say musician, maybe an entertainer, but yeah, something like that.
What do you notice about when you're practicing, and then what you master before sleep, and then coming back to it the next day? Have you got any sort of tips and tricks on that?
I don't practice.
Just natural.
This comes to me.
God given.
Exactly. I don't know. I never really used sleep as a technique or tool or method as part of my routine in that sense. So I didn't. I mean, I know about it. I read about it that people practice something, go sleep a little bit. What I do naturally, not like organically, like Dan does the running. What I organically like to do is try a few skills and then go back to it a few days later. So I guess that's similar to making the information kind of simmer in your brain and let the whole thing be processed. And yeah, certainly some things that were difficult before in the moment, even if you repeat it all day long, some technique or something to play it or to try a song or whatever, and it doesn't work out, very often it's just the best to just put the guitar away or whatever instrument you're using and just get back to it later, definitely.
Yeah.
I never did it in a organized fashion that I would use the sleep as a technique to, practice something and then wait for 2 days and then practice again. But organically, I certainly did it, and it certainly helped, yeah.
Yeah, because there's good science on that as well, about the sort of the neurotransmitters involved in learning something, struggling through something, and then the rewiring actually happens while we sleep. In the neurons. So we have to set the conditions when we're practicing and sort of struggling through something and then making errors and then sort of tweaking and things like this. But without sleep, nothing's rewired. So when people come back to, they've done experiments with like playing a sequence on the piano. People come back to it the next day, and what's happening during the sleep is that the neurons are firing in rapid formation. They're firing this sequence that was on the piano during the sleep, and then sort of making these connections, and then you come back to it the next day rested, and so like you're 20 to 30% better at the skill from the end of the practice compared to after a night's sleep. 20 to 30% gains in well, this was just one experiment with the piano sequence, but
I mean, I guess it's not that you have a mathematical formula that you couldn't figure out and then you sleep and then all of a sudden your brain turns you into a genius overnight.
Yeah, right.
So it's not that it's not just before you looked at the formula, just shortly before you fell asleep, you're gonna get the solution the next morning. It's not like a processing machine that you put in a coin and then the next morning it gives you the results. But on the other hand, in the autobiography of Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones, I think one of the famous songs that he wrote or they wrote was "Start Me Up" or something. I can't remember the song. I think it was recorded in the night. Probably some alcohol was involved, but I'm not sure. And I think in a half asleep state, he recorded the riff, fell asleep again, and found the song recorded the next morning, and he couldn't even remember that he recorded the whole thing. And so yeah, the rest is history. So it can work.
Sleep.
Basically in his sleep in a certain way. I mean, he got up obviously to record, so he must have been in some kind of state of. That's why I don't remember if there was alcohol. The Edison's
half sleep, half wakefulness, kind of half dream state.
Yeah, who knows?
Your cat's trying to escape this now. But yeah, you're right, Sal. Of course, it's not just a matter of I'm just gonna skim this list of vocabulary for 3 minutes and then fall asleep, and it should all.
And the next day you speak Chinese.
No, but Huberman talks about this. He says, I did a blog post about it recently because I think it ties in really well with growth mindset, that it's about the struggle, because the neurotransmitters that are released when you struggle with something like epinephrine, acetylcholine, that they increase your focus and your drive, and then you have to struggle because when you start getting it right, then dopamine is released. Okay, so if it's easy straight away, you don't get these benefits. If you struggle with something and you're really, really wrestling with it and you start to get it right slowly, then the dopamine is released, and the dopamine is the neurotransmitter that really helps the neuronal connections to be made when you're sleeping. Yep. So it is about, doing difficult things and sticking with them for a while, and then the sleep will help you to solidify those overnight.
Very nice. By the way, we are way past our time limit.
Oh,
I'm afraid.
That's good stuff, man. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's great. It's like I said, it's something that we do approximately a third of our lives, and we should have a bit more knowledge about it. Really, I mean, we didn't open the can of worms into what dreaming is and all of that. But yeah, it's a fascinating topic. I mean, there's a series on the Huberman Lab podcast that I heartily recommend. Like between numbers 2 and 4, 2, 3, 4, and 5 perhaps are all about sleep and how you can get better sleep, and how you can be more alert when you're awake. Alert and, what does he say? Calm and focused. And then as soon as you can, you want to switch into, very deep relaxation. If you can go between these two extremes as quickly as possible, then you'll get more out of the day. And then, like I said, the Matthew Walker podcast with Joe Rogan, number 1109, was excellent. I've listened to that a few times now. Really, really fascinating.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you very much. We learned something new.
No, thank you guys.
And I hope also the viewers and listeners got some inspiration to check out the topic of sleeping a bit more in depth and go beyond the obvious superficial I like sleeping thing. And yeah, I hope you like listening to us, watching us. Subscribe, give us a like, or share the love with other people. And
good for our self-esteem.
Exactly. For our ego. All right. Peace out. Ciao.
No.